let's go into Tools and DNS. I think I have a DNS rule set up that I can show you. This is the DNS. And you can see here we have domain on the left hand side, the makervlog.local under forward lookup zones. And the key one you can see here, you've got DC01, host A, there's the IP address, and static. And that's saying that server always gets that IP address. No other server can get that IP address. No other computer can get that IP address. It is solely for that one. And in here, you can see we've got desktop and DFS. The desktop one is actually wrong. That's wrong. I recently changed my IP addresses around from 192 to 10, so that's just a hang up from that. You can ignore that. But this is IP addresses that it's handed out. So these are automatically populated. These computers have powered on and went, okay, I want an IP address. It'll reach out whenever it starts up saying I need an IP address. The DC server or whatever you're using for DNS will go, oh, okay. Sorry, wrong. I was talking about DHCP. So this is mapping it to the host name. So you can see there that it is static, and that's just saying that it's fixed. It's never going to change. But more importantly, what this is doing, this is the IP address which was assigned to it via DHCP. So whenever the computer starts up, it sends out a message to the DC server, which is then running the DHCP. It is asking for an IP address, it's getting given one, and it's then being mapped on DNS. So on here, it's saying that DC01 is 10.0.1.202. And what that means is, for anything that can check to this server, anything that can go to this server and talk to it, you don't actually need to know the IP address. Okay, you don't need to know that that server is called 10.0.1.202. You just need to know the name of it. In this case, DC01, and you can connect to it. But if you think about for, say, a user, so yourself sitting there and you go online and you go to Google, okay, that IP or that website, whenever you type in www.google.com, behind that is actually an IP address. And that's what the computers are using to find it and do the communication. But they're putting that name in front of you because it's easier for you to read. It's more human accessible than a whole string of numbers. So, and that's done by DNS. There are your internet service provider. So say you're with BT, Virgin, TalkTalk, Sky, whoever. They will have a DHCP. A DNS server, and it's what sorts out, okay, you're going to Google, that's actually this IP address, and it keeps track of it. This is an internal one for a company, and what happens if it doesn't know, like if you do a communication to this server and it doesn't know what to go to, it'll then go out to the internet to try and find it, and then it goes to the internet service providers, DNS. But for anything internal, this is what recognizes it. As you can see, there's a little hiccup there. This is saying that desktop is 192.168.1.174. That's wrong. That IP address has since changed, but the DNS hasn't refreshed itself yet, and there are commands that you can do that and things like that. But for the meantime, that's just this is part of the reason why DNS can actually cause a lot of problems. There is a joke saying that in IT, whenever there's a problem, it's always DNS, even when it isn't DNS. DNS can cause issues, but it is very useful for users because it gives you something human readable whenever you're trying to go to a web page or something like that. And even for the IT people, the IT team, whenever they're trying to access loads of different servers, they know, okay, I just need to search for DFS or DC01, and the DNS will sort out which IP address is assigned to it. Okay, so the next server we're going to look at is the DFS. Essentially file server. And if I log in, file server is an important one. I'm sure you can understand why. It holds your files. This server might have a whole lot of your data on it. It might not. It depends on the construct of the business. But if you think of ransomware attacks, which happened. There was one a few years back. Hit a health organization. It was very bad. Ransomware is going to try and get to your file servers, okay? Because if it gets that, it's got all of your files encrypted, and you're a lot more likely to try and pay a ransom, okay? So from an actual attack perspective, definitely a big target. But also, this is where you're going to set up some of the permissions for files and folders and all that good stuff. And if you'd seen the last video, I was talking about, people in your general workforce, they don't need to access HR documentation or HR files because, they don't need to, and that information could be quite sensitive. It could hold a lot of personal information. And so you want to make sure that those are kept separate and that someone in IT, for sake of argument, can't get on and access those files and, have a look around. There is a big problem in IT of IT people having effectively the keys to the kingdom. Their administrative rights give them God rights to everything, which is really bad. It makes life easier for them because it means they're not having to swap between accounts to do different things. But the problem being is then you have a really, really high privileged account, and if it gets compromised, or alternatively the IT person just gets pissed off and it gets disgruntled by whatever reason, they have access to feckin' everything, and it's really hard to pin down when something goes wrong, that it was in fact them. There are tools and stuff you can put in place, but generally, it's hard to tell. Whereas if you have specific accounts and admin accounts that do very specific things, it then makes it easier to segregate that and make sure that someone can't just in a fit of rage very quickly go on and start doing something malicious. They have to then go use a different account, log onto it, and it can all be logged. So it having a God account is a very bad thing, because it also then means that they can access files that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. If we go into here and go into shares, you can see I have 4 shares made up. So general is a general share. That's sort of to simulate your average user's share drive that they put the data that they're working on in. Okay, and HR, it's going to be quite sensitive. It could have personal details. You want to make sure that that is protected. IT, in there you're going to have programs, you're going to have ISO files, you're going to have a whole mess of crap. I can guarantee IT's drive is usually the most messy. It's filled with all sorts. And then management, so that might hold something like workers' yearly reviews or stuff like that, or bonus information or something like that. So again, an important one to segregate down. Now, currently, these have no permissions on them. Anyone on this company can access any one of these. Okay, and that is one of the big things that we'll be going into to rectify and change. That's the big vulnerability with this file server. Now, there is also a few things that you can do within this to protect against ransomware as well, and that'll be another thing that I'm going to be showing whenever we get into it. So that's the file server. Very simple, very straightforward, especially compared to the bombardment you got with the DC. So hopefully this short and sweet is a welcome break for you. That's it in the file server. So the next one we're going to look at is the web server.